Guys, let's continue the talks for tonight. So our next talk will be from Ritchie, Buitre. And
Okay, good evening. All right. My name is Ritchie Buitre. My initials are RB, like Ruby. Coincidence? I think not. And my handle is Rich or else. You can use it to find me on Twitter, Facebook, Skype, and GitHub. All right. And my presentation is DCI for the Rubyist. And this is my first talk, so I apologize if it's a little rough. Okay. And these are the proponents of DCI. The older gentleman is Trygve Rinskog. He's a Norwegian computer scientist, and he's most best known for as the father of MVC. I'm sure you've heard of it. And his colleague or his collaborator is Jim Copeland. He is the leading evangelist of DCI, which is DCI stands for data, context, interactions, which some would say the future of software architecture. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah. So, as I already mentioned, DCI is actually a programming paradigm. You can use it. It's compatible with other paradigms, so you don't have to replace the existing. And what it does is it separates the system data from system behavior. From what, if you look at next slide, yeah. So what the system does is separated from what the system is, like the behavior and the structure, the data, interactions, data, like the model and the entity and value objects, interactions, basically like in Ruby, I would say the modules, it could be the service objects or wrapper objects. All right. So once you separate that, you put them together, the behavior and the data inside the context. And for an analogy, let's say there are two contexts. You have work and at home. And when you're at home, you have roles, like if you're husband or wife to your spouse, or your role could be a parent to your children, or a brother and sister to your siblings. And if you change it to another context, when you go to work, your role changes to something else, like, for instance, to your coworkers, you're a fellow coworker, or if you're the boss, to the company, you're the employee, or if it's in a restaurant, it could be you can play the role of the cashier, or maybe the waiter, or maybe the dishwasher. Each role has its own responsibilities, and that's what DCI does. Is what you only focus on that role when you're in that particular context. And let's go to the next slide. And these are the values that I found for myself when using DCI. It communicates how a feature works in one place. So this improves readability and creates a cleaner design, saving time by reducing cognitive load. So I found that it's easier to debug and refactor. And when we're writing code, we start with how to make it work. Then we start to make it how to make it pretty or nice, and to be correct. Then lastly, we make it so that it's how to make it faster. So using DCI, you can do all those things much easier. And another benefit is it reduces tight coupling. It allows you to test the interactions without having to load heavyweight dependencies such as ORMs or active record in Rails. And I found that you can start writing your domain without depending on, even you can start coding actually, even if you don't have the you don't have to specify the particular class of your data, like, and prototype your domain logic and business logic. All right, let's go to the next slide. So this is a screenshot from the movie The Matrix. It's the dojo scene, and the code is I know Kung Fu when Neo injected Brainjack himself and uploaded the Kung Fu program. So basically that's what DCI does. It injects new behaviors or knowledge, or basically, and here the Neo is the data and Kung Fu is the behavior that we wanted to inject. So in a movie, you have another analogy is in the movie there are actors, and actors are playing roles, and they're given scripts. So basically, they follow those scripts, and each actor or role player has their own role that specific and played in that particular scene or movie, and in a different movie the actors play a different role. Okay. All right. There are at least 3 implementations I've seen of how you can use DCI. First is injection, and then there's the injectionless, then there's the wrapper base. I only talk about 2 of them because injectionless DCI is kind of complex, and when I use it, it feels alien and foreign to me. So I'm more familiar with this injection. In Ruby, we use extend. It's the most obvious method of implementing DCI. Unfortunately, extend is evil because the side effect is when you use object extend, it resets the method cache, which not only affects your class, it affects the entire application. So you're not only slowing down your particular process, the entire app is slowing down because Ruby depends on the method cache. By it, basically, it helps Ruby execute fast code, in spite being real-time scripting language. And another thing is you can't unextend an object. Once you extend it, it's stuck. The method is there. So, and third, when you use extend, you're actually creating a new singleton class, a meta class. So you're creating more classes that consumes more memory, and it will make it difficult for your app, or maybe garbage collecting. It will take a while before you can retrieve your memory if you create more classes that you're not using. All right. So the alternative is the wrapper-based solution. Of course, it suffers from self-schizophrenia or object schizophrenia, when where here you're using wrappers or most commonly known as delegators, or some use presenters. So it's the same pattern basically. The problem is when you write code using usually when you write code using instead of compared to extend, you have the method when you call self in a wrapper, you're not actually referring to delegating the object you're delegating, but to the wrapper itself. So you can call the instance variables directly from inside the wrapper object, and that's been true for the past ever since until the next slide. I wrote a gem that actually solves this by, instead of delegating, there's a cousin to delegation actually. There's, instead of delegating, the method I'm using or the technique, what they refer as forwarding, meaning instead of you can still refer to self as the delegate object and use the instance variables within the context of that delegated object. So, are you interested in seeing the seeing code?
Yeah.
Right. All right.
Open ako na, no?
Ritchie. Let's go to github.com/Ritchie. Rich, or it's like my rich or else. Yeah.
Ano?
Else.
Else.
Yes, that's it. And click wrapper base. Wrapper base. All right.
Okay.
Here, go down to the examples. And yeah, down samples. There's a yeah. Here's an example of the Dijkstra algorithm for finding, in games, it's used in games for fact finding. And here I'm modules for, and as you can see, if you scroll down further, yeah. Okay. Right. No, back to, yeah. So I created a class or a service object called finds shortest, and I inherited from a context where I defined the roles. In this, in my implementation, I named those roles as from, to, city, and road distance. And yeah, and basically, but this is a little more hardcore. I should show you the more another example that's more familiar. Let's go to maybe here, background jobs. Yeah. There's a simpler example of what you can do. Here I've separated the created a module called range query where you can define query methods, and I have a background job called send weekly summary. So you initialized it with the author, and I've separated the post from the author, and the post is extended with the range query. So now previously post doesn't have the method called weekly, but now it does. If you look at the method perform at the end, you can pass a date, and that's how you you separate the behavior from the data or model. All right, and let's look at more examples. Quick, here's another one called money transfer. That's the most common example I've seen. So you have a source account and destination account, and you go further down, and there's your context, the transfer money context, and what it does is if you are it takes two accounts objects and one amount value, and you assign methods for those account roles that for the source account and the destination account. And if we look further down, that's it. So in my implementation, I'm using call as the it's like perform in background jobs. Basically, it's like if you look at other implementations of DCI context, they would use run or execute, but call is more Ruby idiomatic, so that's why I'm using it. And an advantage of using call and inheriting from DCI context is you can use it as a proc the entire context, and it will use call method as if you are using a proc. All right. So one last example before I maybe let's see, acapella looks looks fun. Yeah. There we go. Define behaviors called stop singing. They all have the same methods, but they have different implementations. And if you look down, I defined two contexts, but the same object. If you initialize it with, by default, one singer can play multiple roles. So what I have here is the same object playing multiple roles, and it doesn't suffer from name collision because they all have the same methods, right? But since in my implementation I'm using a delegator or a wrapper, there's no name collision, and you can call the same methods but in different roles, and you get different behaviors. All right. Let's go back to the slide.
Yeah.
All right. Next one. For further reading, you can follow these links. Info is the official website and everything DCI. There are sample codes there for the more popular language, including Ruby, and the DCI forum I follow. This is where the ideas are being developed by contributors, and from the past since 2009, I believe. And you can also watch videos. The next slide. These are the links that I found usable. They're Ruby related. Okay, and thank you. Any questions? Okay. All right. That's all.